Here's the real answer to your question. My life hasn't changed much since receiving my autism diagnosis, but my diagnosis saved my life. This morning, I received an email from a writer asking to interview me for an article that they are writing about autism. Initially, I felt really excited about potentially being a part of the larger conversation surrounding autism. And then I actually read the email and looked up the publication. Admittedly, I don't know where the writer stands on the topic they're writing about, but described it as an in-depth article on whether autism is overdiagnosed and wanted to speak to me about how my life has changed since receiving my diagnosis. The news source goes against my personal values, and I don't feel comfortable potentially being put in a position of having to defend my diagnosis or associated with a potential smear campaign on the validity of late diagnosed autistics. On the other hand, I started my channel to share my story and create a safe space for others who could relate. I feel it's important to be a part of the conversation. However, this is the wrong conversation. We shouldn't be asking if autism is being overdiagnosed, but rather why it took 32 years for me to receive my diagnosis, or more commonly and more concerning, people going their entire lives without receiving theirs. So I'll answer the question asked here on my public platform. And if you want to be a part of the conversation, I encourage you to leave yours in the comments below. I'm going to send a link of this video to the writer and encourage them to read the comments. The question was, how has your life changed since receiving your autism diagnosis? The short answer is both significantly and insignificantly. Like many self-diagnosed people, I had extreme imposter syndrome. And I knew that for me to tell my family and be taken seriously and to confidently speak publicly online, I needed a professional diagnosis to back me up. I was incredibly lucky to not only be located near one of the few clinics in America that specializes in adult autism and ADHD diagnosis, but was also in a position financially to be able to pay the astronomical out-of-pocket costs. The medical system in America is broken, and I have received zero support since receiving my diagnosis. To my knowledge, the only therapies that exist here for autism are geared towards children or adults with higher needs and other intellectual disabilities. Even if therapies did exist and were covered by my insurance, the steps required to find that out and set it up directly butts heads with my neurotype. So in that regard, my life is just as difficult as it was before receiving my autism diagnosis. So what is the point then of getting an autism diagnosis as an adult? I sought out an assessment to get confirmation on something that I already knew. Many of us grew up second guessing ourselves and our experience of the world. We were told to try harder, focus, stop overreacting. It's not even that loud. Calm down. Can't you just be normal? When you grow up different, and we all knew we were different, but you don't have the context for how or why, the natural default is to blame yourself. It's an incredibly isolating and lonely existence that creates a breeding ground for comorbid illness like anxiety and depression that are so commonly associated with autism. So here's the real answer to your question. My life hasn't changed much since receiving my autism diagnosis, but my diagnosis saved my life. It offered me the context that I needed to not only understand my experience of the world, but to also trust it as truth. It laid the groundwork for me to begin releasing my inner critic in favor of a more kind and compassionate inner dialogue. It gave me permission to stop going through my life in a way that felt like walking against the current. It provided my friends and family and husband the context they needed to better understand me and my needs. It opened the door to deeper human connections in my real life through this channel and the autistic community as a whole. And for those of you arguing that autism is overdiagnosed, kindly sit down. We have always been autistic. We're only just now being recognized medically, often because of self-recognition first. Even if the therapies and services offered to autistic adults suck, we still deserve the validation of a diagnosis, and accommodation where it's needed. It is my hope that with more representation being seen and more voices participating in the conversation, that increased medical recognition can lead to improved accommodation and acceptance. So here is a call to action, friends. Diagnosed or self-diagnosed, I encourage you to tell your stories in the comments. How has learning that you're autistic changed your life? Remember to be kind to yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.